Hey, what's going on, man? Vash SMP here to talk about Blue Spring Ride, or Ao Haru Ride, episode 3. It came out, I think, a day ago, maybe a day and a half ago, something like that, but I was in North Carolina, so I couldn't review it. But man, this episode out of 3 was probably my favorite other than episode 1. Episode 1 kind of set the tone, but this episode kind of jump-started everything, for me anyway. But the episode starts off, and, you know, it's still Futaba waiting to see Ko or whatever. She's running down the hallway and she sees him or whatever. He sees her at the shoe lockers, and they also just happen to run into his brother, who she finds out in this episode that they're brothers, and she was just like, yeah, they do look alike. I'm like, yeah, they look just alike. You know what I'm saying? But she finds out that they're brothers or whatever, and Cole's brother just like, hey, I'm cooking dinner tonight and all that type of stuff, man. And that scene was funny as shit because before they said they were brothers, she thought that they were gay. So that made me laugh because she was like, hey, I'm cooking dinner tonight. And she was like, what? And then he was like, and I'm staying over. She was like, what? And then and Cole pinched her cheek. He was like, what the hell are you thinking about? And then she was just like, you know, whatever. But they walk home together because Cole's brother asks Futaba what her name is, and she's like Yoshioka Futaba, and he recognizes the name. He just kind of like, Yoshioka Futaba, and then he was just like, oh shit. And Cole realizes that his brother remembers the name, and he just like, hey, there's a student trying to make there's a teacher trying to make a pass at a student. And he grabs Futaba and he runs away. And that was a funny scene too, you know what I'm saying? But the next scene was the most heartwarming scene to me ever. They were walking, Futaba and Ko, they were walking, and she started asking him all these questions about, like, that's your brother, do your brother live with you? And he was like, no. And she was like, do you live by yourself? He's like, I live at home. And then she was like, what's your mom? And he like, listen, I'm tired of all these questions, man. You're so annoying and all this type of stuff. And then she was like, hey, but you brought me with you. And he let her go. And he was like, oh, yeah, I'll let you go now. Goodbye. You can leave. And she just kind of broke down and just started crying because she was just like, what, thinking in her mind, what happened here? Like, he disappeared from my life, and then he reappears in my life. And he's just so nonchalant about it. Like, he acts like nothing's happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was nothing between us. And she's just very disheartened by that. And I can understand why, though. Like, if you thought you had this connection with another person and then they show back up and they just act like shit didn't happen, that would kind of throw you off, though. You know what I'm saying? So she was thrown off by that or whatever, man. She starts to cry, and he's just like, hey, you're annoying, dummy. But he puts his head on her shoulder, you know what I'm saying? Like, he buries his head in her shoulder, and he starts to apologize. He's like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, I apologize that I disappeared from you all those years ago, and, did you wait for me during the festival? She was like, yeah, and he's like, I'm sorry for that. I wanted to show, I knew that you hated boys or whatever. She was like, and she started to say that was something else, but then he was like, I know, I was going to show up, but then we started to have problems at home, and I just couldn't come out, And I was just like, yeah, like, this scene was so well animated, and it was particularly, like, a very, very heart-wrenching scene, though, man, because, like I said, his head is buried in her shoulder. She's crying, and his face is obscured so as to not show tears. Now, just like, oh, man, like, that's a great scene right there. That is a great scene. I loved it. I love the music that was playing when that happened. That was just a wonderful, beautifully animated scene. And they walk home together or whatever. And Cole doesn't go home. His brother cooked or whatever. His brother just kind of at the house waiting. But Cole doesn't go home. And the rest of the episode serves to move the story further within a year or 6 months, I'm assuming, because now they're second-year students instead of being first-year students. And Cole's in the class with Futaba. Makita's in the class. That girl Muro, I think is her name, M-U-R-A-O, Muro, she's in the class. Cole's in the class, and that dude, I can't think of his name. It began with a K. That blonde-haired kid who we saw in the last episode, he's in the classroom too. And they're pretty much, you know, trying to reestablish themselves. Well, Futaba is trying to reestablish herself from the way that she was in the previous year. And she reaches out to Makita, who was also trying to not reestablish herself, but just have more friends, you know, than what she had last year. And I know it's gonna sound crazy, but I just realized this. That girl, the shy one, Makita, I hope I'm saying her name right, because I might have to go back and edit this shit, but she reminds me of, I can't remember that chick's name, but that chick, have you guys seen the Complex Guide to Kawaii House? That shit, to the Kawaii Complex thing? That fucking, it's a girl in there, she's a 19-year-old student or something like that. Yeah, 19-year-old college student who always wears makeup and has on these nails, like these press-on nails and shit. The girl Makita reminds me of her. I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison just so you guys can see who I'm talking about, but I can't remember the girl's name, but I'll look that up when I'm done with this. But, yeah, she tries to reach out to her, and they talk, and some other girls in the class like, hey, that's that girl. I heard that girl right there. Nobody talked to her last year. And they was like, why? Well, it must be for some reason. And so Futaba goes over and just speaks to her. She's just like, hey, I'm about to... In her mind, she's thinking, I'm going to make it so that she's more easily approachable. So I'm going to start a friendly conversation, and hopefully this just moves past the rumors and stuff that they heard. But then, like, we also heard about this girl had a fight with two other girls in her last year, and she looks like a delinquent. So they were just like, ooh, she's a scary girl, we gotta stay away from her. And so Futaba comes a little bit disheartened about that, you know, and goes like, you know, if you give up, no one's gonna care because nothing happens, and if you keep trying, no one's gonna care because nothing has happened yet. And I was just like, yeah, you gotta establish something first in order for people to give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? You giving a damn because it's affecting you personally, but nothing has happened, so no one would care if you just stop doing what you're doing. You have to establish the connection first. And the next day, they're having a vote to decide who's going to be the class representative, male and female, and the event representatives, and no one's raising their hand. And the teacher's just like, hey, we can be here all day until y'all decide this shit. So who's going to be the class representative? And Futaba raises her hand. She's like, I'll do it. She becomes the female representative, and she's asking the class who's going to be the male representative, and no one's raising their hand. At first, that blonde-haired dude was about to raise his hand, but then Kyo just put his hand up and just like, yeah, I'll do it. I have no problem with it. You know what I'm saying? And there's some banter between the two of them up there, and they're like, okay, now we need some event representatives. Who's going to do it? And Makita raises her hand. She's like, I'll do it. You know? And then that other girl, Muro, I don't know how to pronounce her name. I gotta pay attention when they saying this shit. She raises her hand high as hell, like real high. And it was funny because Futaba was just like, oh, okay, because she raised her hand, I know who next. And it was a blonde haired dude. He raised his hand, so now we have the five people who are going to be assigned as representing that classroom. The male representative, the female representative, and the 3 event representatives. And that's how this particular episode ends. But right before that, though, they said they have to host a training camp, a leadership training camp that Ko's brother is in charge of teaching. And I'm assuming that that's why that girl, Muro, whatever, I'm assuming that's why she raised her hand. I'm assuming, because it seems like she had no interest in anything for the most part until like the dude to Ko raised his hand, and there we had that little fucking thing that happened with her and Ko's brother in episode 2. Remember that? They were walking in the hallway and he said something to her and she kind of looked back for a while and then he looked back like, what the fuck? So we had that little thing with them. So it's something there. I don't know, man. She seemed like she's like a top student or whatever, and she might, you know, feel superior to Cole's brother or something like that. I don't know, but she seemed like she was a top student or some shit. But right now they in regular classes, so it's kind of weird. But I don't know. I don't know. She might have some type of rivalry going on with Cole's brother. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I don't know, but that's how the episode ends, man. Let me know what you thought about it, though, man. Blue Spring Ride, episode 3, or Ao Haru Ride, episode 3, man. Vash Stampede, gone.